a lot of fun stuff on it.
Wow.
I know.
Well, I appreciate that.
I'm sure you know it all, but just in case.
Oh, here it is. It's in here. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Thanks for coming and
Sure.
taping.
Okay. This meeting is now called to order. And first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from last meeting. Have you two had enough time to review them?
I don't have a comment because, of course, I wasn't here.
Right.
But they look good.
Okay.
I did, just now.
All right. All in favor, or would someone like to move to
Okay.
approve these minutes?
I approve to move the meeting.
Okay.
I move to approve the meetings.
All right. Would you like to second?
Should I if I wasn't here?
I think you can still approve them from what's written.
Jane can answer that. I think you can. According to the rules,
Yeah,
I'm
a
sure you're
point
here
of-
now.
So you're sure they're correct?
Yes.
Okay,
looked at it,
I will
yes.
second the motion.
Yes.
All righty. All in favor of approving the minutes from last meeting, say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved from our April meeting. Let's move to item 2, and it's about the franchise renewal and where we stand. And we would love to hear from Nan Winter on where we stand.
Okay. So, my name is Nan Winter. I am an attorney that's been practicing law in New Mexico for about 30 years. Same as Jane, we went to law schools together. Ironically, 16 years ago, I negotiated the current cable franchise. It's up for renewal as of last year, and Jane has done a spectacular job of pulling together the city's resources, getting edits into this document, conducting technical surveys, policy surveys, constituent surveys, and really putting those notes and edits into the document. So she brought me in to sit with her at table and negotiate with Comcast what the city would like to do with this new agreement. We have gotten a proposal from Comcast. We got it about a month or two ago. It's modeled after the Colorado model ordinance with some key ingredients missing. Regardless, the city has at this point opted to use its current master cable ordinance and use the current grant of franchise authority to Comcast and edit the existing documents and give those to Comcast. So here's where we are. And stop me anytime, but here's where we are with those edits and that draft back to Comcast. I owed those documents back to Comcast last week. I'm running about a week behind with graduation ceremonies and such. They are ready to go to Comcast tomorrow. I'm going to send one other document to Comcast, not only the grant of franchise, but the master ordinance. I'm also going to send Comcast a note on where their draft to us is lacking. it's missing the good stuff that they negotiated with Colorado municipalities. I want them to know that we know that that they had planned on treating us differently than they had treated their Colorado municipalities. So by the end of the week, Comcast should have at least 3 documents from the city of Albuquerque. On Monday the 21st, we are scheduled to meet with Comcast and its team, which I'm sure includes a couple of lawyers. And we will go through the city's edits. My objective on Monday is to make sure they have no preliminary questions on our documents and for them to understand what our priorities are. And our priorities are, or have been identified and presented to this board before. If you need an update, let me know. Our biggest priority is, of course, an updated set of customer service standards. There are other issues, including an update and more financial and technical qualifications and what would be the word? Requirements from Comcast. But our biggest concern here is customer service standards. Ironically, that's what was missing from Comcast draft when they sent it to the city. The funny part is I can't see how they could possibly not adopt customer service standards in New Mexico that they've already agreed to in multiple other jurisdictions. But it just doesn't make any sense. I really don't expect much pushback from Comcast on that, but that's kind of where we are. Now, we plan on meeting with Comcast on the 21st. That'll be our initial kickoff. I believe it'll be substantive. I'd like to continue substantive meetings with Comcast through the end of May and all through June. My goal would be to get these documents, both the master franchise and the grant of franchise authority, to City Council staff during the month of July. The reason I'm suggesting July is the governing body takes a break in July. Staff will be there and we'll give them something to do. If we can get it cleaned up and through City Council staff in the month of July, we would then use August and September to get this through City Council committee meetings and hopefully to the City Council as a governing body before the October 1 expiration. So those are my timing goals. If you have any questions on...
I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned the Colorado market. Was there a specific market you're referring to, like Colorado Springs, Denver, or
Well,
just broadly Colorado?
It was the municipalities in Colorado got together and drafted a model cable ordinance. I happened to be working with the gentleman that did that. His name is Ken Fellman. He's with Kissinger and Fellman. That particular draft was done by the equivalent of the Municipal League in Colorado, spearheaded by Mr. Fellman. Any community up there that has renegotiated or whose franchise agreement with Comcast has expired has used the model ordinance. I would say I'm aware of about a dozen of them that have adopted the model ordinance, almost verbatim. I mean, there isn't many differences. In fact, I was kind of shocked when I got Comcast draft to the city of Albuquerque and it excluded the customer service standards it had agreed to at least 12 times in Colorado. Our amendments, Jane, in our amendments to our ordinances, Jane has not only pulled together the Colorado language, she's also relied on Seattle, Philadelphia, Portland.
That's it.
Is that it? Okay.
4.
Okay, so I mean, our edits to our model documents here, or our documents here in New Mexico, are pretty much based on something that Comcast has agreed to someplace else. So there should be no surprises when Comcast sees these edits, but we'll see.
Do you feel that they would treat us differently?
Well,
They already did.
Yes.
No, I mean in this go round.
Madam Chair, I think she summed it up. They already did, just by sending us a draft. So I'm not sure why they did that, but you know, as with anything, it's a negotiation, right? They have a basement, we have a ceiling. They started with bare bones, and, you know, we've got it pretty much loaded up with all the goodies that they've given to Philadelphia, Portland, Seattle, and the Colorado municipalities. So I expect that somewhere we'll meet in the middle of that continuum, hopefully closer to that end of the spectrum where that included Seattle, Colorado, and Philadelphia.
Mhm.
So
Was there anything in there that specifies duration, like as far as 4 years? Because I know this time around it's 4 years, correct? 4
No.
or 5 years? Right, Jane?
Let me see if I have it. Jane,
It's
you-
5.
It's
5 years, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's on the very shortest end. The last one was 15. And that's typical. But I think that all the cities are shortening them up a little because the whole technology is changing so much, and you know, scheduled TV is
Mhm.
kind of on its way out. Although our revenues have been, you know, stable, so maybe we caught it just right. You know, so we can do some adjustments. But yeah, it's 5 years. That's pretty short.
Mhm.
Comcast is gonna want something longer than that, but I'm working on Jane knows, because Jane's working on the same thing, I'm working on a couple of telecommunications franchises with other local governments here in New Mexico. And I'm recommending 5 years as a starting point, because one, some of these companies coming into Albuquerque are new. We don't know who they are.
Yeah.
Two, the technology is changing overnight, and if you're gonna tie fees to revenue and the technology's changing, you probably need to stay on top of that technology and how it ties to revenue and capture as much as you can. So I'm recommending now that we're keeping some of these cable and telecom franchises shorter term as opposed to these past 15-year agreements. And, you know, some of these used to be 25-year agreements.
Mhm.
But,
Yep. I see that as wise.
So,
Some of
so
them
the
are
primary reason is due to
definite.
the fact that technology is changing.
Expired.
No other.
Holy cow.
Technology is
behind.
changing, and the players are changing. You know, Comcast is gobbling up others and being gobbled up. That's also happening on the telecommunications side. So when you've got a new player coming in, and it's happening quickly, you want to know what they're going to bring to the table.
Mhm.
They might want to be here, and if you want to be here, we want to know what you're going to bring to the table when you come.
Mhm.
So it's technology.
Initially, when you negotiated that previous contract, the 16 years, that was through with Jones Intercable, correct? And they had purchased that contract? So technically, they didn't really sign that contract.
I can't even remember now. See,
In
now you're really
99?
taxing my memory.
No, that was Jones Intercable
It
that
may
we
have
signed.
been Jones Intercable. Hold on, I got it right here. Nope, it was cable. It was Comcast Cablevision of New Mexico. So, but we did have one prior to that with Jones Intercable,
Right.
and then
Which they purchased, correct? Or
Comcast purchased Jones.
or was grandfathered into them or something to
It
that
could have
effect.
been. It could have been. Well, there was definitely an assignment of a franchise. But you could have entered into a whole new renegotiation. At the time, the city had to approve the assignment from Jones to Comcast. And we could have had a big, long negotiations about what comes with that. My recollection, that was probably closer to 20 years ago, was that we didn't hold Comcast hostage in that assignment. It just wasn't the nature of the city to do that at the time, and the technology wasn't then what it is today.
Right.
So,
Another question I had vis-a-vis that contract, what happens if there is a merger? I mean, we're in a climate of mergers and acquisitions, so what happens if Comcast goes through a merger? Does that affect our contract with them, or
absolutely.
is it null and void? Or
Well, no, it's not null and void. They have to come to us for express authority to change the contract. And I'm not suggesting that we would hold them hostage on that merger, but you have the option of reviewing and approving the assignment. And that's pretty typical in the telecommunications field.
But it would not be renegotiated because they went through a merger. We could imply that, correct?
You could get more out of it if you wanted to. But, you know, my goal is we're going to get as much out of them as we can in this round.
In this room.
Yeah. So it depends. I mean, if it's a merger that's a year from now, I don't think you're going to get much more than what we're talking about today. If it's a merger 5 years from now, or an assignment 5 years from now, who knows what the technology is? Who knows what cable services have been regulated or deregulated, and we could possibly tap into. Cable Act could have even changed by, 5 years from now, but this whole negotiation is really structured and governed by the Cable Act.
Correct, yeah.
That could change.
And of course, we lost the battle with the rates, the tier rates back in 2010. I think I brought that up in the last meeting.
Yes.
So that is never open to discussion, correct? We can never discuss with them as far as the rates and the tiers.
No,
the different tiers.
we fought that, actually. I had already left the city, but the city attorney at the time contacted me and asked me if I would help him fight Comcast's petition to the FCC to get the Albuquerque service territory declared to be a competitive area. And we filed comments, we pulled together other municipals. I think Bernalillo County weighed in, I think Los Alamos County weighed in. So we had a good contingent of local governments filing responses at the FCC, fighting Comcast's argument that there was effective competition in Albuquerque. We even brought in consultant Garth Ashbaugh at the time. I think he supplied us maybe with an affidavit or a letter. But we felt like the FCC was sort of rubber stamping these petitions, and one day they issued a decision and it was over.
Did you mention that the city hired Joseph Van Eaton
Oh yeah, we brought in
to represent us in
Yes.
that petition?
yes, it wasn't just Garth Ashbaugh, we also brought in
Yeah.
So FCC ruled against us,
Oh,
correct?
yeah.
And we did lose that. So
yes.
that was in 2010, as far as I can.
As far as I recall, I think that sounds right. And and Comcast's argument was essentially that the dish, the satellite dishes had infiltrated their ability to compete locally. I didn't agree with it at the time, but since then, there's all kinds of infiltration in Comcast product offerings today. So what I didn't believe was probably true in 2010 is probably true today. There's, they definitely have some erosion of market here in Albuquerque.
Yeah,
Now,
a lot.
Good
Yeah.
news is that franchise fees have been relatively stable.
Yeah, that's important.
And there's
to
a good
us.
possibility with the renegotiation of this franchise that those revenues will tick up a tad. We've beefed up the definition of gross revenue.
So it may go up a cent or two.
It won't go up a whole percent. I don't think it'll be a whole lot. It's 5% of, right now the fee that you can collect is 5% of a set of service offerings. We have added services to those service offerings, so it'll still be 5%. There'll just be more service offerings, hopefully, at the end of the day when this is over.
Mhm.
And again, we're not adding anything to the service offerings that they're not paying in other jurisdictions. So you won't see a big tick up in revenue, but you should see some tick up in revenue. I'm not gonna jinx myself.
Yeah.
Very good. Sandy?
I don't have any questions. I'm looking forward to seeing how it all works out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what we should be doing is probably reporting back to you at your next board meeting on our meetings with Comcast. And, right now we're giving them some documents that have red lines in them and some notes, comments. So hopefully we can give you a set of documents that have fewer red lines in them a month from now. And then present you with hopefully a fait accompli, a done deal in July.
And so we're still at the time, we're still looking at October, correct? As far as
This franchise, as it's currently extended, expires October 1. So I'd like to see the city council act on it in September, October. I would love to have this group's endorsement of our work product in July, August timeframe, assuming we're done and we're happy with it. So my hope is in August we get the council clean documents along with your cover assessment of that, and of course, city legal's assessment of where we are and the administration's assessment of where we are.
Okay.
Jane, you want to add anything to that?
No, it's a very good summary. Thank you, Nan.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Nan.
Okay, and then Jane knows how to get a hold of me if you have any questions, or I will make sure that Jane has our cleanest edits, with tomorrow, and that she gets those to you, and it's about 180 pages of light reading.
So lots of time ahead would be appreciated.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, if you have any questions, she knows how to find me.
So when is the next meeting? June? Because I think, Nan.
June 12th.
you're-
12?
June 12th, so I think that it would probably be good for you to come.
Okay,
To
yeah, you'll be
that.
ready for it.
Although, if you cannot come, I plan on attending all those Comcast
Okay.
negotiations as a client. I will I'll be the client representative of the city, and Nan is the lead negotiator. And I think it's very, very appropriate to hear her summary of status. But if for some reason you can't come here, I can fill in. But it's June 12th.
June 12th. It's not ringing any bells, so that's a good thing. Okay.
All right,
Thank you
Thank
again.
Thank you,
you.
Jane.
Thank you, Nan.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Next item under item 2, next discussion point is how the mayor and council received the board's resolution 02.
Well, so actually Nan is part of that report too, because Nan and I went to a meeting that the mayor was supposed to attend, and he only attended very briefly, which, Nan, I took that to be a vote of confidence in the team that's been assembled, right? Sarita was there the whole time, Sarita Nair, who is the second in command, and she is the chief administrative officer. And actually, we had met with her before. I'm really not sure what that meeting was for, because I didn't ask for it, but anyway, we, of course, reported that the cable board had supported through Resolution 2 the submission of the ordinance, the city's proposed ordinance in its entirety, with a emphasis on the consumer Bill of Rights. And so they're pleased to hear that, but we have brought another resolution today, number 3, because I made a typo, a typographical error. I wrote Department of Education when I should have written Public Education Department. And that has to do with one of the recommendations
Right.
of the board, that those charter schools that are certified by PED are included in the INET. So, we probably should provide Nan a copy of that, but I can email it to you if you have to leave. So the other reason we're bringing up number 3 is so that we can have Sandy Barnhardy Travis's signature, because in my
You
view,
did that on
you-
purpose, I know.
No, well, no, I didn't do it on purpose. It's a coincidence.
I know.
So that it adds the strength of the full board's
Mhm.
signature, and that's why we
Very good.
brought up number 3. That's the only change between 2 and 3.
Okay.
Those are the only 2 changes. One, we corrected Department of Education to Public Education Department, and I checked that before I came up here to be sure that's the name of that department, and then Sandy Barnhardy Chavez's signature. So that's my report on item 2, and I turn it over to you, Chairman White, for discussion.
Okay, so my so you submitted 02's resolution to the city council and the mayor.
Not the council yet, but
Okay.
to the mayor and to city clerk.
Okay,
And so that when we get 3 signed, then we'll submit both to the mayor's office.
okay,
But I told them about it.
okay, that
In
there
the
was a
meeting.
typo.
No, I just told them what the resolution was.
Oh, all right.
And they were, you know, supportive and happy that the cable board is operating and that it is taking a position that supports the city essentially. So
All right.
there's nothing to be unhappy about. They're, you know, very happy with it.
A positive,
Positive input.
right. Okay. Anybody have comments on that?
No, I
I-
move that we accept the changed, corrected resolution.
And then the important thing is that we get resolution -03 signed by all three of you as we're sitting here, so
Okay.
that we can turn it in right away. Sometimes we have a problem with
Do it.
getting the signatures.
Sure.
And then, did you sign the minutes, by the way?
I can do that right now.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
make sure that we
Everybody
get
open?
everything
Thank you.
signed. And then we can turn it over to Danielle. Once these board documents are signed, then we submit them to the city clerk.
You want to hold on to that?
I'll give it to
Okay.
Danielle.
All right, so we're actually going down to the third discussion.
Wait, we haven't moved. We
Right,
haven't,
right, you have a motion. And we've discussed that, what the correction is. And so there's been a motion to accept the resolution 03. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, the resolution has been seconded. All in favor of approving resolution 2018-03, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is approved. So, hallelujah. Is this one okay to sign for everybody?
Danielle, is it all right to sign that one? Okay.
Alrighty.
All right, now I can put this to Danielle.
That was real simple. So she's done, we'll move to item 3 here. All right, let's move down the list to item 3, presentation on net neutrality. And Jane, that's your gig.
So this subtitle of the item 3 is Open Internet Pledge signed by Mayor Keller.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is an important document, and for that reason, we made copies
Yeah.
for everybody. And it's in your packets. It's in, right there.
Oh, you've got another one there too.
Oh, okay. It's in your packet.
Oh, underneath that one.
Yeah. Where is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Wait, let me give you this one because I want
Yeah,
this one.
that's yours.
And then, anyone in the audience that, have you all picked up this, the pledge that the mayor signed?
Well, that is so right. Good for him.
Is it passed yet?
Yeah, they just, voted on it.
Oh, that
It's a
one.
cable board,
Okay.
yeah. This is the pledge that the mayor signed. So I'll spend about 5 minutes, no more, explaining what this pledge is all about. And it's not a full presentation, and I think that we have discussed individually, I've discussed with Brian, Sandy, and Giovanni separately. so that we're not having a rolling quorum or having a meeting on the side. The idea of doing presentations, one of which could be about net neutrality. We could do presentations on municipal broadband and maybe on PEG. You know, that there's a lot of history there. There's dynamics going on in all those areas.
Yes.
They're all dynamic areas. And so when I say presentation, that my idea is not for me to
Right.
get up here. I'm not really, I don't view myself as that type of presenter. And I think that it will have more meaning if we could get people from the community to discuss these things. Now, I did go on vacation. I've been out for a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. Before I left, I talked with Joseph Yar, who's the assistant AG, and Hector Balderas did join a lawsuit that challenges the FCC's order that repealing net neutrality. However, I guess he feels the way I do. You know, he doesn't feel as if he's an expert. I called a law school. She's like a professor. Her name is Beth Kamowitz, and Matt Mays, who's in our IT department, worked with her when they both were staff at the business school library. Beth is a lawyer, but she was a librarian for a long time. Remember Beth Kamowitz? You know her, right? Yeah, so Beth is great, and I see her from time to time because we're, you know, kind of not only colleagues, but we have like our kindred attitudes about things, and so about, you know, politics and things like that. And so she actually did not know, I mean, she did not call herself an expert on net neutrality, but she referred me to a couple of people that I have not had a chance to call yet.
Okay.
So that would be an idea to bring somebody in from the advocacy community, like someone from that, you know, that you all might know in available media, or SWAP. You know, I've talked with Beva and George Lujan and Beva Sanchez Padilla over at SWAP.
Just so you know, she's married to an IT professional.
What's that?
Beth is married to an IT professional.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know. Okay, that's good to know. I will talk with her again. And anyways, but today I thought I would spend 5 minutes at least explaining this pledge.
Right.
And so the pledge is modeled on some of the other pledges that have been signed, like by governors and things like that. But this particular pledge was circulated among mayors of cities, and I in some of the materials I saw that went along with this pledge, I saw that Mayor Bill de Blasio in New York was one of the leaders of promoting this particular pledge. So. And actually, the language in the pledge is similar to what is in the proposed ordinance, because we do have the pledge embedded in the grant of authority, because the idea is that the internet providers make this agreement with each city, you know, and so that's why we have it in the grant of authority. But this pledge doesn't do the same thing. It's not intended. The function of this pledge is different than the function of putting the same language in the ordinance. So
Right.
if you have it in the ordinance, because Comcast has to accept the ordinance, it becomes first of all, it's negotiated with Comcast, so there's an understanding that it is an agreement. But once the city council votes on it and typically they will approve it, then Comcast still has to accept it. They sign an acceptance of the ordinance. So again, that makes it, puts it into a form of an agreement. And so the idea that Nan will advocate on the behalf of the city is that Comcast, being a good corporate citizen, will agree to net neutrality principles voluntarily. And then this pledge serves the function, it's a kind of a political function. So where the same language in the ordinance serves as a contract, an agreement that Comcast specifically says it will not violate principles of net neutrality voluntarily on its own, regardless of what the FCC is saying, when a whole bunch of mayors, and I think so far about 50 of them have signed this. Oh, here it says 80. So on top of the handout is a press release that the mayor's office prepared. So the purpose of this is more of a political purpose. The idea is for elected officials around the country to engage in a debate, or not a debate, or a discussion that is nationwide, where the mayors are stepping forward and saying, we support net neutrality regardless of what the FCC is doing right now. So in this 5 minutes, I'm going to explain what net neutrality is, a little history of net neutrality, and what's going on right now.
Okay.
And I would say, keep in mind, the market is, Nan was talking about the market. The market is very complicated for telecom. Those of all of you know this from, your interest in the topic. So net neutrality affects Comcast because it is an internet provider, right? Because it provides internet services over its network, over its system. It also affects most of the other telecom companies that have franchise agreements with the city, so that when the city, and Nan mentioned it in her summary, that we're also working on the telecom public rights of way ordinance. When we write that, that is going to have the same language as in the pledge, right? And that's because it's more than Comcast who has to abide by these principles.
Right.
And so that's kind of a background of this language and how it's used. So to summarize it, and then I'm going to explain a little bit more about what it actually means. The pledge, the mayor and the 80 other mayors that signed this pledge that the cities that they represent or they're elected to run will procure applicable internet services that do not block, throttle, or provide paid prioritization of content. 2, the mayor's pledge to ensure an open internet with any free or subsidized services we offer to our residents. For example, a municipal broadband, or public Wi-Fi. That hasn't been solidified yet, but I think that the mayor's office is working on that. Not to block, throttle, or engage in paid prioritization. Require clear and accessible notices of filtering, blocking, and prioritization policies. Monitor the practices of internet service providers so consumers and regulators can know when a company is violating open internet principles. That is a tough thing to do. And this is just getting launched at this moment. And when I do the history, you'll see. Encourage consumers to use ISPs or internet service providers that include municipal options that abide by open internet policies. So then that's the pledge. What does it mean? I think that the clearest thing I saw this afternoon on what net neutrality means is in this particular handout, Net Neutrality Violations, a Brief History. So when you look at how companies violate net neutrality, then you realize what it really is. And I'll read you a definition. At the very core of net neutrality principles is the idea of First Amendment protections and the protecting the First Amendment characteristic of the internet. And so looking at this handout, and we have some extras over here. Let's see. These are the ones that I had stapled together by accident.
Is there anything under there?
Yeah. Is that it?
Is that an extra one?
Yeah, that's the one.
So-
Do we have any extras? Maybe it's underneath that pile there. So they say it's a First Amendment thing because, I hate to pick on poor China because, I'm sorry to look at your stuff. I don't know, I had a whole pile of them stapled by accident all together. Oh.
Anything in there?
Anyway, we don't have that many
That's
people.
all right.
But here's an extra here. And anyway, so when you look at this, sorry.
That's all right.
When you look at this, okay, I hate to pick on China, so net neutrality is apparently being violated in China because what China does, and you've heard this on the news, right? They block the content of certain websites that they don't like, or people that run websites that they don't like. Well, surprise, surprise, we live in the free country over here, but apparently it has happened here too. And this is this one, net neutrality violations, a brief history. You will see that even Comcast has violated net neutrality principles in 2005 by secretly blocking peer-to-peer technologies. Its customers were using over its internet services like BitTorrent or Nutella. So an investigation by the AP confirmed that Comcast was actually blocking these sites. So its customers could not use these sites if that's how you're getting your internet. And when you read through this list of the violations by AT&T, Windstream, Metro PS, they're all blocking certain types of startups. Sometimes they're blocking unions, political entities that have political philosophies that the ISP does not agree with. That's what's listed on this one. So that is at the heart of net neutrality. It is, another aspect of it. Oh, and so then there are these other articles that are over there. I don't know what happened to these because they were all stapled together somewhere. But they're all, you can find them in a website called Free Press, Free Press. And the guy who is from that organization, Tim Carr, was on Counterspin this morning on KUNM. It's at 8:30 on Tuesdays. And that's a program that's been on for a long time, and it's about media, and so if you're interested in media, you should probably listen to it. It's on every Tuesday.
Okay.
Every Tuesday. And so this guy, Tim Carr, was on it, and I was there being a busy beaver doing my work this morning, and I thought, oh, wow, they're talking about net neutrality. I'm supposed to be talking about it this afternoon. So then there's a little bit of so the violations is about First Amendment. It's also about net neutrality. I think that one way that the city can safeguard against throttling is to make sure there's enough bandwidth. And I have talked about that at other meetings, that cities and state governments, city governments, state governments are always talking with telecom companies about adequate investment in the infrastructure for the locality. And So they can't use that as an excuse to throttle, you know, if they don't have enough bandwidth. So we're trying to cover both bases. You know, Nan, I hate to say this because, you know, we're ready to shoot it off, but, you know, on enforcement, it's, you know, it's hard to enforce these things. You almost have to have them reporting their contracts with content providers. And then how do we know they're not turning them over? You know, how do we know that they are turning them over? How do we know that they're not hiding them? You know, I think that the enforcement will require the community to be alert to when there is throttling and report it to a group like the cable board, and then the cable board can look into it, and if they are throttling, you know, that's a violation. And we have penalties in the ordinance for violations. We just have to check it and make sure it's broad enough to capture the violations. And that's kind of a last minute thing, Nan. But I was thinking about this as I was preparing this. So I wanted to bring out this particular article so that you all are aware of what net neutrality is by looking at violations. I wanted to also let you know a brief history. So, like in three bullet points. One, around let me see if I wrote this down here someplace. In 2005, FCC classified internet services as a information service, so essentially it was not regulated. And in 2005, it probably should have been regulated, but it wasn't regulated. And if anything, of course, every day it becomes more and more pressing for internet to be regulated because it is an essential utility.
Yeah.
It's a utility.
Yeah.
It's a telecom service which is essential. Well, in 2015, the FCC was able to enact an open internet order, and that caused telecommunication services, that caused internet services to be reclassified as a telecommunication service and as common, as the providers as common carriers. So, you know, that's legally significant, very, very legally significant. The FCC had attempted to regulate internet providers twice before that, and twice before 2015, and it was unsuccessful because the court said you don't have any jurisdiction over information services. Aha. So then the FCC said, in order for us to be able to prevail in court, we have to change the whole classification and make internet service providers common carriers. So any of you who are familiar with the civil rights movement and things like that, common carriers are like public accommodations. Common carriers in the civil rights means that these services have to be provided to everybody without discrimination. And so for a brief moment, we had ISPs classified as common carriers, telecommunication services. Then the FCC could enact these rules of conduct. So the rules of conduct are a lot like these things, you know, that are in the pledges that FCC made the ISP providers, internet service providers, follow these kinds of rules of conduct. Very similar to what's in the pledges nowadays. So then on December 14th, 2017, we have a new day at the FCC because now the Republicans are in the majority, 3 against 2. And the Republicans proposed that the net neutrality rules be repealed and that ISPs be reclassified to information service providers
Again.
once again. They are no longer under FCC rules, common carriers. So then this morning, and you can go to Counterspin and go to today, and you can listen to this Tim Carr talking. So when he was talking, he made a nice summary of what people are doing because in the face of this FCC order. So Congress can reject the rule. There is a provision in the statutes where Senate or the Congress can actually reject rules that are made by the federal agencies. And there is a vote in front of the Senate that they're predicting will take place on this week, May 16th or 17th, where the Senate could, well, it'll be put up to a vote, where the Senate could vote to reverse the FCC order. I don't know if that's likely because of the
It's
makeup.
Republican.
Yeah, makeup
Based.
of the Congress.
Yeah.
But that is one, tactic. Another one that the advocates around the country, including the AG here in New Mexico, have filed suit in the courts, and they are trying to invalidate the FCC order from December 14th on the basis that it sounded like procedural. I haven't seen the complaint and I haven't read it, but it seems that it has to do with the notice, it has to do with how they repealed the order.
Did they
and-
violate the Open Meetings Act?
Yeah, there you go.
I know, those kinds of things. And then the last thing they brought up was local action, and, we've talked about that through this mayor's pledge. Washington State is passing, or has passed legislation. By the way, Seattle has by far the most progressive consumer bill of rights, right? And the governor in Washington has shepherded through a law, I think it passed, where the state legislature has to, the state legislature passed this law. Under the law, the executive has to accredit all telecom providers, have to give them an accreditation. So it's probably through something like the Public Regulation Commission would have to accredit telecom providers that operate in the state, to get certificate of necessity and convenience. And in order to get this accreditation, the telecom providers in Washington State have to sign up a pledge or promise not to violate net neutrality principles. So another part of the order, by the way, the new FCC order is to preempt the states on something like this. So, preemption is very complicated, so I haven't read the order, let alone try to analyze whether they can preempt it, whether the language is doing what they want it to do. But, that's one kind of weakness of what Washington State is doing, because if it's preempted, then that legislation is going to be invalidated. But that's down the road, because right now this order isn't in effect until June 11th.
Right.
Okay? And that just came out last week. Other places are doing something like in Montana, and what we're trying to do, which is say to those internet providers that come to your city or state that we're not going to do business with you unless you sign this pledge. Now, the weakness of that approach is that the states and cities can't do anything under the Telecommunications Act to stymie the provision of telecommunication services. So they can't do anything that's prohibitive or discriminatory. So that's in the Telecommunications Act, 47 USC 253, and as it applies to wireless is in 332. But the thing that applies to all telecommunication services, 253. However, as I'm talking about this, realize if they're not a common carrier and it's not a telecommunication service, then maybe
It's,
we can make them agree to these things, you
Maybe.
know? Like, it's all very dynamic.
wow.
And I'm not speaking today as an expert, so I already gave my caveat emptor. This is more like issue spotting. That's really the end of my presentation on, just a short summary of what net neutrality is. I hope that it makes it a little bit clearer.
It does. Thank you.
Well, we were kind of talking before we officially started the meeting about having a presentation on net neutrality and inviting the public to it. I like that idea, and I'd like a little maybe discussion among us about whether we would like to encourage that sort of thing.
I think it's very important. The community needs to be educated on these things, and it's not common knowledge at this point, and yet it is such an important issue because the internet is kind of the lifeblood of our commerce, of our education, everything we do.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of thinking that maybe we could spend between now and the next meeting coming up with some names or some speakers that would agree to a public forum
Yeah.
on net neutrality, and maybe come back at the next meeting with some possibilities.
Some names.
And then if we
agree
actually
with that.
get some people that we can name,
Sure.
then get an actual date set. What do you think?
Just on that specific topic.
Yep.
Well-
Yeah, I'm all for it.
It's going to get enacted unless by our next meeting, the repeal of the net neutrality will be repealed on June 11th,
Right.
unless Congress votes it down. Say you can't do that. We're going to change it up. So I'm almost thinking that a meeting of such or a seminar, a conference of such magnitude of of importance may not be able. Almost becomes a moot point if it goes through, because what can you do at this point? It almost needed to happen at this meeting, or sometime between the two. That would be a special meeting.
Well, I think you're bringing up a point that the board members should discuss, but as a technical point, I would say that Congress can always bring up the legislation after the next election. You know what I'm saying? So none of these are dead and never to, our society can always act on these things. So Congress can act again, even if it votes down the current bill in May. It could bring it up again after the elections. There's the thing in court. There's the most important is what's going on here in Albuquerque, that the people here understand net neutrality and support it and are pushing their elected officials, whether they're at the PRC, whether they're here in Albuquerque, to do the right thing. And by the way, the PRC is entertaining some rolls on broadband at this point, which it has never done before. And so I'll bring that information to you on next time. I don't think that they're going to land in the middle of the fray, because that's just not the way they are. And right now, the majority is not that kind of at the PRC. I shouldn't say this, but I'm
But you're going to
I'm not
anyways.
going to characterize it. I'm just going to say I don't think it's going to be a strong action, but they're kind of opening the door a little. So I'll bring next time what exactly they're doing. It's some kind of guidelines for broadband. So I'll check it and I'll email it to you all right away, so you can see it, because I just got it last week.
Okay.
And so, I don't know. I mean, that's a technical point. That's a technical legal point. All of these things are fluid. Congress, courts, and local action. And I happen to believe, and Nan will remember our critical legal studies class, jurisprudence class in law school, right? That was so contra. You don't want to remember it, but I remember it. And so the courts, one of the things that we learn in jurisprudence is that the judges are people that are influenced by what they read in the newspaper, what they see in their community, and so on. And so maybe the judges aren't here in New Mexico, but we're part of, the whole picture of the communities in this country when we engage in this. I know it sounds kind of abstract, but I'm fading from technical input at this point to philosophical, so I will stop talking
Well,
and let the board discuss this.
And your ideas, both of you, on whether we should proceed to move forward with a meeting on net neutrality for the purpose of informing the public as to how the city is reacting to it.
Well, I'd like to do that, because I think, I agree with Jane that the thing in Congress, we may not be able to stir up a whole lot of interest in before it actually happens. But I think that we can get people locally to back the mayor in his resolution, and also to take a look at other local actions that they could do.
Sure.
So I'd like to do that. Plus, it would.
We could get some interesting names of people to show up, hopefully. So I think it's a great idea too. How about you?
I'd like to look into this a little bit more. I think there's such a vast amount of interest in net neutrality. I think we might have to go about it in a little different way, probably change the venue a little bit. I don't know if that's possible. That would be the
Yes.
first course of action from my point of view. And then something like that we need to get a hold of some experts. And we need to have them speak and educate everyone, including the board.
Right.
And I'm not shy to learn. I think I'd rather be stupid for 5 minutes than for the rest of my life. So I'd rather learn. And I know the basics on net neutrality, but there is so many things in there. I was talking to my son about it, Sonny, and we were trying to just to grasp the idea. And I got bits and pieces here and there, but there's so much information there that I think all of us could learn if we just kind of prepare it the right way and have the right kind of a event.
Right.
If I can even call it an event. So
Do we have to have any kind of motion about this, or can this just be something where we let brew and
discussing
then
and
put
move
on the
forward.
agenda for next time?
I think that you could make a motion on something like this.
And
How about something like, I move to put the discussion of an internet neutrality presentation on the next agenda.
Oh, I see. So, no, you don't have to make a motion on that.
for an agenda.
But if you were going to resolve to actually put on this presentation, then you could entertain a motion on
Yeah.
that. But on an agenda item, you can just put it on the agenda.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the three of us are thinking, first we gotta make sure we find people who can speak to this issue, who are
Correct.
willing to speak to it. And before we make that kind of a commitment.
Okay.
I think that's what needs to go to the agenda. It's the net neutrality meeting, and in that discussion for next time that we, Jane, bring names that we think might be appropriate for presenters to a meeting of such magnitude. I'm just thinking outright, I'd love to see the mayor there. I'd even like to see our
Counselors.
well, council would be good, but as a presenter, I'd like to see like the state congressmen, congress people, representatives, and how they viewed it, and by this time maybe they would have voted on it. Was it just the Senate as
Yeah.
opposed to Congress that would have can enact?
No, the vote will go in front of the House at some point, but what they were reporting on the news this morning was that the vote in front of the Senate will be this coming week, and then it will,
Oh, gotcha.
you know, go to the House if it proceeds.
Okay, so yeah, it would
If
be.
it doesn't, if it gets killed, then that's the end of it.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, and okay, so just names that of people, even if we don't personally know them, but it might make a difference. I know some IT people that I feel would make good presenters.
Great.
And I can bring those names to the table at next meeting.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Jane, do you, I have a question for Jane. Do you think there is anyone in AG's office that would have, that could,
I'm going to talk with Joseph and Choya again, because Joseph said that
Since
would be
they're
me,
working
but
on
I
it.
don't know anything. You know what I'm saying? That guy is so stretched. You know, we all know that. But Choya, you know, actually she's the head of the consumer part, so I don't know. I think I'll talk with her too.
I think anywhere we'll find experts would be the AG's office.
Yeah, Choya Curry and Joseph Yar are the two assistant AGs that work in the area of utilities and telecom and consumer.
And we might want to check with, legislative council services at Roundhouse to see if there's any legislators that
That's a good idea.
are picking up this issue for the session. I mean, there
Sure,
might be
yeah.
bills already pre-filed. I don't know if there's a legislator that's a telecom guru or not, but LCS might know that. And I can check with my legislator friends.
You said her name was Choya,
Choya Curry, Corey.
oh, like K-H?
Yeah, Khoury.
I'd like to see how one of the broadcast general managers feel about net neutrality, if it will affect them, if they don't care. I've got a name that I'll give a holler to.
Okay, great.
And see if
Broadcast channels as far as what channel? PBS? We referred to.
that it's, well, because they have products that go across the internet, and they use the internet a lot, and they pay for internet, a lot of it. And as a broadcaster, you know, it's a lifeblood for information that they get from all sorts of sources. And so as a broadcaster, which is in the telecom industry, you know, I was wondering how they feel about that.
In their point of view.
Well,
And maybe from another organization that might be a big user of the internet. Sends out a lot. I mean, somebody from Sandia Labs would be really great to get involved.
It's getting kind of late. I was kind of thinking maybe we could finish up our items.
Mhm. Okay. Are we,
So we're not making a motion on.
no, we don't
Yeah,
need to
making
make
a
a
motion.
motion on that?
You
We'll
can
just
just put
add
on
it
the
to,
agenda.
just
agenda.
a recommendation at the
I wasn't
end.
sure.
So these are two books, are very good. Master Switch by Timothy Wu and Captive Audience by Susan Crawford. And it's really about the market. And historically, the market, there's a tension between the telecom companies that provide the pipeline for content and then the content producers. And so in this day, in what are we now, 2018, there's been, I always talk about market power, so, like I just say one sentence and keep it to that. But there's been consolidation on that front, right? Because, for example, Comcast has the pipeline, but it also owns Universal. And so, NBC, right? And so in these laws of the Cable Communications Policy Act in 1984 and the Cable Television Consumer Protection and Competition Act, these are laws passed by Congress. That was one of their concerns, that content was not monopolized by the companies that own the highway.
Right.
So, these things are in the laws, but there's no enforcement mechanism. And so then we're morphing into, and then look at all these mergers, and they get passed. So, I don't know, I'm just talking again about how important it is for the people in the communities to act on these things, because these laws are
You
not,
go, Nan.
they're not helping,
Jane.
I'm sorry.
You go. You go.
Okay, sorry, all right, that's enough for me.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's enough.
You're very passionate about this, I can
know,
tell.
I
Thank
know.
you for your
That's why I'm
passion.
gonna be the client, not the lawyer.
Thank you.
I need a bad cup.
Yeah,
Whew, okay. Any more discussion on the net neutrality, you two?
No.
I have a question for Sunny did an internship with Senator Udall's office. Do we know anyone there as
Oh,
far
yeah.
as?
No, Leticia Delgado.
She's a telecom-
Telecommunications, LA and legislative correspondence director, so she talks with constituents a lot. She may be somebody, I know she's pretty busy. She works in DC, but she does take trips to Albuquerque, so you have to, we'd have to contact her with that. I could reach out to her. I could give you her email, but.
We could Skype her in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could be possible.
I
Yeah,
was
this
thinking
day and age,
about
probably
that.
appropriate
Skyping.
Net neutrality. Yeah.
We still have it.
Yeah, well, we still have
Could you see if we can get over?
it. Oh, yeah, absolutely, without, yeah.
'Cause,
Thank you.
So Sunny will work on that, and then I'll connect with him.
That'd be
Since I
that'd
see
be
him
great.
almost every day.
We
Sweet.
have some time.
That network thing. Can't live
Nice.
without it.
nice.
Okay, let's move down the list here. How are we doing on time? Okay, it's almost 7. Item 4, public access channels, discussion on possibility of requesting an additional channel from Comcast. Currently, the city has 3 public access channels. Only 2 are funded. The 3rd channel has no fundings allocated to it at this point. Thoughts?
Okay, so it's actually 4. So
It's not 3.
it's not 3, so it's, and that's my error for not catching it. This, channel 27 is the public access, 26 is local origination. So 27 is run by UPublic, 26 local origination is ProView. There's education that's
Right.
that's not funded, it doesn't have much content on it right now, if anything.
Oh, and it's a sports one, too.
And then there's GovTV. So
Ah.
that is a PIG channel. There are 4.
And only 2 are funded.
Only, well, GovTV is funded, so 3 are
Yeah.
funded.
96 is not.
96 is not.
Okay, so that was my question for
Okay.
you and possibly
Okay.
Jan. I
So,
don't know how. we can even discuss that, or,
Yeah,
Um,
so it came up at one of the IPID meetings. I saw it in the minutes, and I wasn't here yet.
Okay.
And so there was discussion about whether they should discontinue funding, because at one point they were paying Telnet or one of those. And then some of the government officials said, why are we paying these education entities when they have so much other funding? And so they cut it off. And I think that there was a debate about it, because Councilor Garduno brought it up in a ordinance or resolution like a year later, proposing funding, and he did not have the votes to get that through. So based on that, there's no funding for Education TV. The council decided explicitly not to fund Education TV in that vote.
So, I guess my question would be, what would be the harm of keeping that channel open for, if we find something other than education to use it for?
Well, I
What do you
think,
want to?
well, right now, we've got 9 channels reserved, 4 that are lit and active, 3 that are funded. Comcast is proposing to take away 5 of the 9 that are reserved. But there's inherent value in those channels, whether you're using them or not. So I think my goal is to preserve as much of the 9 channels as we can, as possible. Good news, so I'm also concurrently working on the franchise agreements between Comcast and the Village of Los Ranchos and the Village of Corrales. They have no access to channel capacity right now, and they have both sent a letter to Mayor Keller. Well, one sent a letter to Mayor Barry and one sent a letter to Mayor Keller, asking to use channel capacity offered that the city has, City of Albuquerque has. The existing franchise allows the city to lend its channel capacity to Corrales and Los Ranchos. So when I said good news, what I meant was Comcast wants to take away 5, but you just now found a use for maybe 1 or 2 more channels with the Village of Corrales and the Village of Los Ranchos. So you have some opportunity to partner with those 2 villages and use up more capacity that you've already got reserved. Of course, those 2 villages would have to pay for their own programming and put their programming on. I also don't think that those 2 villages combined could probably use a whole channel. I don't know, but you know, and we're finding uses for those 9 channels outside the city of Albuquerque. So I think that's a good thing. So that's kind of where we are. In terms of funding, that's a policy call, right, by the city council. And I vaguely remember, that was after my time, before your time, I vaguely remember at least one counselor wanting to spend more money on using a channel. Didn't happen. So that's kind of where you are.
So why would we want an additional channel from Comcast?
Well, you have 9.
Right.
Today you have 9.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, Comcast wants to take away 5 of them. Okay? So what we have to do in this negotiation is justify our reasoning for maintaining 9 when you're not using 5, right? So
that includes all the INET, the public access, the educational. We currently have 9.
we have 9 that we can use, 4 that we are using. Okay, so Comcast wants 5 of them back so they can sell it to somebody who will pay them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, they're doing it in other cities. So
Right,
we know how to do it.
and we want to maintain 9 so that we have the ability to grow into them, or maybe sell them ourselves, right?
So
right.
would, you're already negotiating this, it's already in your proposed
no,
ordinance?
Our
or-
proposed ordinance calls for maintenance of the 9. Their
Okay.
proposed ordinance calls for scaling that way back to 4.
And we've already, as a board, given our approval to what you're negotiating. Do we
Right.
need to do anything else? Do we need to have another resolution that the city should continue to advocate for 9 channels?
Well, we can bring that back to you in June. I mean, if it turns out to be a sticky point in the next couple of weeks with Comcast, would love your pounding the table on 9 channels. But again, we're using 4. And we know Los Ranchos and Corrales want 1 each. That's 6. You know, how hard is it for Comcast to yank back on those other 3, right?
Right. Start high and then negotiate down.
Well, we're both doing that, right? They're
Yeah.
starting at 4, we're starting at 9.
Yeah.
And like I said, the good news is we found a good reason for not letting go of all
Right.
9 right now.
Right.
So historically, Comcast has discussed with the city getting stations, channels back in exchange for payment. And I have to look at those files because I pulled them, and that's my recollection as I sit here.
And we might hear about that again in the
Yeah.
coming weeks, so.
Right, and so there is a legal concept that those channels actually belong to the city because the whole system was developed with those channels already designated as for
Mhm.
public use.
Mhm.
So we won't forget, I mean, that's part of the discussion, and I know the advocates bring that up, and I want them to know that that's part of our picture too.
And you have an
That-
appraisal on
hang
this
on.
week.
Yeah.
I'll let you talk at the public comment.
I thought I gave it to you, but I'm going to give it to you again.
Yeah, I do have the appraisal.
I have it in my file, in my office, the appraisal. So Garth Ashbow, the accountant that city hired to review franchise revenues, did an appraisal of the value of these channels. And I'll make copies and I'll send them to you.
Okay.
So when are we gonna find out, Nan, when, I guess we find out in June regarding these channels?
Well, it's not scheduled for our May 21 discussion, but we're trying to meet with Comcast weekly for the next 6 weeks, so I'll make sure it gets teed up before the June 12th meeting.
Okay.
I think that was my only question.
Very good. Any comment within the board here?
Nope.
Okay. That was good information. Status on the proposal for public access, local origination, and education. I think we've kind of gone through some of that. Do you have anything to add,
I
Jane?
just want everyone to know
The
that this
addendum?
addendum 2 is available.
Right.
And that right now the deadline, hopefully the deadline will continue to be May 30th, 2018. Proposals have to be submitted by then.
Mhm.
And then the board can discuss its positions on various aspects. But I would advise against a discussion about that now before the proposals are in.
Right, exactly, and I think we made a motion on that last meeting that we wouldn't really discuss any of the RFP issues until we could see some of the applicants.
But this is great background because these are the questions that the offerers or potential offerers submitted to the city and the answers.
Okay,
So you can see what the concerns are.
awesome. Okay, let's take it down to 5. Status of adjusting the board's webpage. Have you two had a chance to look at our part of the city's page, webpage, website?
No, I didn't even know this was an issue, so.
It's up and running, and did you get sent the form from, what is it?
Matt Mays.
Matt Mays? on how the public can send us comments or questions?
No.
Okay,
And I'm wondering if it went to spam.
could have been. I would check it. It came directly from Matt, didn't it?
Yes.
And-
Or, I'm not sure, I might have sent it to you, or Danielle may have sent it. It was a while, like, I don't know, right after the last meeting, so I can't remember.
Okay. Anyway,
I'd be open to getting that again.
Okay, right. I think the most important part is a capacity of the page to accept electronic, electronic comments from the public. And then the issue was how to send them to you. And so Brian authorized me to use a certain email that I
Right.
sent to Matt. And I think Giovanni, you approved a
Correct,
certain.
yeah, I did.
But the problem with Sandy is that you only have a state government email. So I don't know
No,
if you
I-
want to use that.
I do have a private one, I just never read it.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Well, we can talk about that offline.
Yeah.
I don't see any problem with sending it to my state account, because before I even joined the board, I cleared it with up to the lawyer for
Okay.
employee relations.
Okay. So I'll tell
So I can't see that
Matt.
they can.
I'll give Matt your CYFD
Yeah.
email. Okay, cool.
Excellent. Okay, so, and you can take a look at that form. If you go to ABQ, or cabq.gov, and under the search, go cable board, it'll take you to a list of that stuff, and the ones, our site about, has our minutes on it, has the place where we can, public can make comment through that.
So did that issue get resolved about how we can see the public comments or questions?
You can see the public comments, but they're not going to see your email address.
Oh, okay.
Although we had an IPA request for
Yeah.
contact, and we gave it for Brian, for Chairman White.
'Cause,
So, yeah, it is kind of public, because
Yeah.
when we email with each other, any email between you and me is generally, between board members and me, it's generally public record. Unless for some reason I'm giving privileged legal advice, generally I'm not doing that.
Okay.
There was another question I think Jane I had regarding the subscription, where they sign, where the general public can sign in, they get a notification. I think I brought that up with Danielle too. I think me and you, we discussed it, I think, in the previous meeting, where on the website they are able to sign, once they sign in, or if it gives them a capacity to sign in, so they get an email alert of some sort where it tells them that the meeting is on. so we
Oh,
can get a-
yeah, that would be a good idea. I haven't talked with
And
Matt about that.
Could you let us know probably?
sure.
in the
That's a
next
great
one?
idea.
Yeah,
And I
Add-
think that would encourage, what that would do is.
Make it
at
an
least bring-
email list, so.
yeah,
Yeah, because now if you talk to a lot of them, they'll probably say, well, I didn't know about the meeting.
yeah.
So this way kind of alerts people in some sort of an email fashion probably.
Yep,
Maybe a subscription or something, and they can figure it out, IT can figure it out.
yep,
Okay,
yep. That's very good.
That would help the, to get individuals to come out here. I think they would.
Yep,
okay.
I
The
agree.
attendance is practically zero at this point. So we need to have some sort of.
I think that's. Any more discussion on the webpage?
No?
Okay. Let's move on to item 6, which is public comment. Take it away, public.
Well, my question will be answered. It had to do with the value of the channels.
Ah,
So I believe that will be addressed when you talk to the Garth.
Okay.
He was going to give you an idea of what the values of it.
I didn't bring that file with me, but next time I can report on it if you want me to, if you want it on the agenda, like the value of these channels. So there's
Right,
a
right.
particular way that he values them, like based on a lease, for example. You
Mhm.
know, that's if somebody were to lease those channels. So that I remember, but I don't remember the numbers or, you know.
Well, would that be of importance to base what Comcast is giving to us, or would it be based on the value that we're giving to the public, or that we're not using this money? I'm trying to see a value in why we need to know the value of what these channels cost.
I think it's because we're thinking about making them pay for taking them back. So if they're gonna pay for taking them back, then we need to know what they're worth.
Okay,
Do you agree, Nan?
okay. And
Another public comment, it looks like.
so so yeah, let's put that on the agenda, but that's coming up here in just a bit.
Do you have a public comment, Sonny?
Yeah, just two things. First, to Jane's point, in terms of for ISP and like public kind of like awareness of what they're doing and tracking that, there are several websites that I know of that you can just type in your IP address, or you can just press a button and it'll test the speed of the internet. And so maybe a way to kind of like have an accountability system is to have a portal for the public to basically report any extremely low internet speeds. I know one time I was working on an assignment and was having to watch educational documentaries, and the internet was super slow, and I called and they're like, oh, it's only up to this or that, or you can have up to this speed even though we're paying for something. And
Right.
So I think just having a consistent body of evidence that the board could refer to, or the city could refer to, as a way to kind of like bolster their arguments or their accountability of the providers. And then regarding the channels, the 9 channels, maybe an additional purpose for one would be to have something coming out of the university. I produced a show for 2 years with UPublic, and students were really shocked to hear that, and they, everybody that I told about it had an idea to do some kind of program or something like that, and I feel like that would be a great way to get university students and faculty engaged in promoting their work. And the university just got a new president, President Garnet Stokes, who's really interested in kind of rebranding, and the university is going through a lot of changes right now, so it might be the time to send a line out to them.
So Nan, is there room in your proposal to ask to ask Comcast to come up with a way for us to monitor the actual speed it's delivering? Or is that already in there?
Yeah, I think what jumped into my mind when you mentioned that was that maybe they should be advertising a portal to test speed. So they should be on their bills, or bill stuffer should be publishing a recommended portal to test speed, and being very open and transparent about its use.
Right.
So then people can do it themselves, and let us use Comcast to publish.
To watch Comcast?
Yes, to
Well,
watch
and
Comcast. So I think-
truly, that's something that I wrote down when we were discussing that.
Yeah.
Net neutrality, I said speed test software. And if we were to, as a governing body on the website, maybe on our part of the website for the city, throw some links down that
Yeah.
Great.
IT would approve
Great.
for these speed tests. You just, any more you go out there, you got to be careful with where you're linking. But if the city's IT professionals said, this is a good one, this is not, this is okay, and we could put those speed test links on, which would draw people to our side of the city website.
I'll talk with DTI about that tomorrow.
Well, and then we can, Comcast can put it on their site, click here to test our speed.
It would be interesting. I would sincerely be surprised if they actually were supportive of that, because even with the net, this was like 2 years ago, we were paying for 50 megabyte internet, or 50 gigabyte internet, and it was registering like 5 megabytes per second.
Right.
And so, and if people are under that, if they're getting that level of low quality service under the current regulations, I mean, there's no telling. I would be sincerely surprised if they were supportive of, like, I would say it would have to be independent, like the city would have to promote independent websites and things like that.
I'll put a sentence in there before it goes to Comcast tomorrow
Yeah.
about them publishing on their own
Yeah,
page.
good. That's great. And that goes with some of the other things that we already have, which is on the Consumer Bill of Rights, there is, contemplated something like what they have in Seattle. So in Seattle, the city has a webpage where they put all that information about their providers. So there's more than one over there. We only have Comcast. But it's their rates, their schedule, and now we could put something in there about the speed test. Under the standards in the proposed ordinance, I'm sure that this can be cleaned up because I'm not an engineer, but I did write this with the help of Paul Chapman in the DTI department. The standard in the first year will be that based on the demand for streaming and video on demand in the year 2023, that Comcast ensure adequate bandwidth for that peak demand projected for 2023, so that no other user is throttled or displaced if they're using the internet for other purposes.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah, so that's in there.
Okay.
But that thing about testing speeds, that's that enforcement part that's so
Yeah.
hard.
And the interesting thing is, because there are websites out there already, it doesn't have to go through any legislative process. It's as simple
Yeah.
as people being made aware of it and then giving being included to be a part of the accountability process.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about that idea is that it really is about empowering the community, the people, to help ourselves and also work together to help the whole community. So that kind of data, if we can get it all together, it can be a very powerful tool on behalf of the community. So thank you. That's a great idea.
Very good. Any other public comment? Anybody else want to make a comment? Okay. Well, it's that time to look at the next meeting and put a few things on the agenda. And I think we've already kind of started a list here. Certainly we want to go over, and Nan, we'd like to hear a report from you if you can make it, and if not, you from Jane in your behalf on how that first round went. I
Or
believe.
two, it might be more than one.
Okay. If by that meeting, that'd be great. Whatever up to date we can get. I'd like to hear about the value of channels.
Okay, that's me. I'll get that research.
Okay.
I'll find it, in other words, I'll bring it here.
As a discussion point, I'd like to have the board bring names to the table for possible presenters for a net neutrality meeting. And I think we need to, at that point, hopefully you'll have some applicants for the RFP, so we could discuss the applications and possibly the addendum of the RFP. Would you like to see anything else on the agenda?
I'd like to see if there's progress about email alerts on our website.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
Email alert,
I'll do that.
great idea. Giovanni?
I think that's it for me.
Okay.
It's kind of added that in there. Yeah.
As it
She
is?
stole my point there.
Good deal. All right, I think that covers everything for tonight. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Seconded?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all for coming.